Welcome to the discussion. My guests today are Tim Bowden, the General Manager of Consulting for Management Concepts, Sherry Merrill, the Executive Director of Product Management for Management Concepts, Anna Malden, the Product Management Director for Leadership and Management for Management Concepts, and Lahaja Ferrara, a Senior Human Capital Advisor for Management Concepts. Welcome to the program. Glad you're all here to join the discussion. And what a perfect time for this discussion. Agencies are starting to take real steps and reorganize and restructure. You're seeing the Agriculture Department, for instance, consolidate around mission areas. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is looking at how to close small offices around the country and centralize administrative functions. And there's even discussion that Interior may be moving some headquarters functions out west. But we know several things. First, reforming the agency or any organization is hard. Agencies aren't starting from scratch. They also face a number of existing constraints, such as the existing workforce, a fixed set of resources to invest, and a mission objective that's not likely to change. So how do all these agencies work to, within these limitations, develop a strategy to get where they want to be? And what role does the workforce play at all levels of the organization? Well, that's why we have a panel of experts. So let me first start with our first panelist. Let me go all the way at the other side of the table for Tim. When we talk about change, when we talk about change management, we talk about reorganization, you have individual, you have leadership perspectives. Talk a little bit about those two perspectives to kind of get us started.
Sure, Jason. You know, I think that the thing that we think about often at Management Concepts when we're thinking about how you manage change at the organizational level is that you have to start with the people. And that individual level person who often feels so much fear and anxiety because there's uncertainty in the environment and there's a lot of change and they just don't know what to do about it. But what we've seen is that the people who survive and thrive in those kind of uncertain environments are really the ones who take the opportunity to own their own future, who will pause and think critically about what they are as a worker, about what their capabilities are, and do some real self-reflection and self-assessment about where they want to go and what they can do in the future. And you know that self-assessment, self-reflection can be sort of a tricky concept. It can be hard for people to get their head around. And so when I've been at points in my career, sort of inflection points where I needed to think critically about who I am and what I wanted to do, there are really kind of four key activities that help me get through that. You know, the first is looking at the folks I work with and my peers and saying, what do I admire that they're good at? What are the things that I wish I could do that I see them doing? And how can I build those capabilities? What are 3 or 4 things that I do every day that I could get better at? I think, you know, I look at the end of every day and I say, you know, this didn't go so well. How could I do that better in the future? And then, you know, the other piece is what feedback have I gotten or can I get from mentors or people who I work with that can help me identify trends and places that I can get better? And lastly, are there things in performance conversations that I've had with my supervisor or my manager that have come up over and over again? Either things that I do really well or things that I can get better at. And those sort of self-assessment questions really help me to hone in on areas that I can grow and develop and areas that I can own and take forward into the future. And I think the last part of that, you know, there's the self-assessment piece, but there's also self-reflection. And that's really about figuring out what you're good at. We've all seen, and what you're passionate about, you know, you've seen the Venn diagram, right? It shows up in my LinkedIn feed, it feels like once a week, where there's a circle on the left that says, you know, what I love, and a circle on the right that says what I can get paid for, and the intersection is like, this is where you should be working. And it's always in this context of you need to change careers or find a new job or be an entrepreneur to make that unison. Self-reflection is about finding that spot where your passions and your capabilities link up and looking at your day-to-day work and figuring out how you can contribute to your own organization by owning that intersection. And we can make that complicated, but really it's not. I worked for a client many years ago in the Navy doing systems engineering and acquisition policy work. Right, even I didn't find it was that interesting, and I got paid to do it. But somehow she managed to find this niche of connecting the policy development work she did with helping soldiers and sailors be safe and come back home to their families. And she brought that unique passion to the job every day, and it was infectious. And so she managed to, even in a job that felt mundane, find a way to unite her passion, her capabilities, to find a real place where she could develop herself and own her own career so that no matter what was going on in organizations around her, she had a place to anchor. And I think that's the real key for individuals as they try to survive during this time of change.
Tim brings up some really interesting points, and I'm going to actually turn to Lahaja for some comments, since you are our HR expert in many ways on this panel. I think we all have a little bit. But one of the things that you have to be keep in mind is how can the individual, right, be that self-reflection? It's so hard to do. How do you ensure they're equipped to do what they need to do?
Sure. So one of the things that an individual can do is to get a coach or a mentor. That coach or mentor can be found within the organization or could be found outside of the organization. But that coach or mentor will help that individual with perspective. Where do they need to focus their attention? During times of change, oftentimes people focus inward and they have a very narrow focus. And that coach or mentor could offer perspective for that individual.
You know, I think finding the coach is sometimes difficult.
Sure.
And how do you find the right person? And you think you have somebody, and then they are like, that doesn't work. Do you have recommendations? What have you seen that works for finding that right person? Is there anything?
Yeah, so at Management Concepts, we offer a pool of coaches, and we match individuals with multiple coaches. And so that way, they can take a look at their resume and see what resonates for them. And, you know, it's okay to work with a coach for a little while, and if that doesn't work, you can end the relationship and start a new one.
I think that's a great point, because you don't want to end it, right? You don't want to be that negative, well,
Correct.
that didn't work. But maybe that's okay. Yeah, Sherry,
sure.
jump in here a little bit, talk a little bit about your perspective, because the importance of ensuring that the person is ready to understand the change that's going around them.
Absolutely. I think one of the really interesting things about change is that we encounter that every single day, not just at work, but in our personal lives. And being able to have transferable skills that go from one to the other will really set you up for success. And I think, you know, buying a house, getting a new car, getting a new job, all of those things are things that we tackle day in and day out. It's the same skills and the same competencies that you need to be successful in the workplace. And so we had one client who actually thought, this is a great idea. We're going to take 3 different changes. We're going to do a new competency model and new performance management and a huge reorganization to our group. And they thought, this is great. We're going to do it all at once. But to the folks that we did focus groups with and did surveys with, they thought, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. I don't know how we're going to do all of these different things and still stay focused and be successful. And so the trick is thinking, well, how do you do that in your personal life? And how can you take those things that help you navigate through the day-to-day and not only use them to be successful in your personal life, but also in your professional life? Because ultimately, it's the same core set of skills.
I want to bring Anna in on this conversation as well, because one of the things about what Sherry was talking about, what Lahaja was talking about, is kind of, as Sherry said, I thought it was really well said, everyday life just translate into workplace. But there's other things that you need to kind of keep in mind too as you're going through these changes.
Absolutely. And so what we found in looking at scores of data every year that we gather from our clients and people that come through our classrooms is that there really are some skills that differentiate you as you build your leadership capability, especially in the federal government. And it's really about how you think about your thinking. So consider skills like creative thinking, critical thinking, strategic thinking, all of those things that are going to prepare you to be adaptile and agile in the moment, but also remain above the issue and keep that perspective. And I think it also goes without saying that people need to be resilient. When change is constant and that is our normal, that is a skill that all of us could benefit from, both in our personal lives and day-to-day in the office.
It's interesting you talk about being resilient, and so many times when you talk about restructuring and changing and reorganization, the negativity is, oh, that's going to be awful for me. Yeah. Is that something you guys are seeing that agencies have a trouble with, is understanding that, hey, not everything's a bad change?
Absolutely, and I think seeing that transformation in our clients is, we explain to them that there are things, tangible things you can do day to day. They leave our engagements and our programs thinking, I can do this. If I break it down, if I understand what's required of me and where I have control in the situation and the ability to move the organization forward, they feel really empowered. So that fear becomes an opportunity.
You said the key word, control.
Yep.
We're going to take a quick break and come back. Maybe we'll delve into that a little bit. You're listening to the panel discussion, People First, a Strategy to Drive Change, sponsored by Management Concepts on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.